I don't know how to get the teachers to stop, keep interrupting me or keep bothering me. And I said, well, I have a different question for you. When they come, I want you to actually look at your behavior from a new lens. Every time you go out of your office and give them the thing that they're asking for, you're actually enabling that behavior. You are enabling them to continue to be dependent on you and not understand how to be resourceful and learn how to figure it out on their own or rely on each other versus you. Welcome to the Schools of Excellence podcast, a place for insightful conversations about building sustainable schools of excellence. Join me each week as we explore the importance of leading with your values, creating impact, and leaving a lasting legacy. My goal on the show is to provide you with clarity, elevate your mindset, and equip you with practical strategies and inspiration. I'm Chani Wolshansky, a proud mother of four, a former New Yorker, now savoring sunny Florida vibes. With a professional journey spanning 18 years across all levels of school leadership, I bring nuanced insight that delve into the intricate details of running a center, as well as the broader visionary aspects of leadership. Thank you for joining me for this conversation. Let's build a legacy of excellence together. Hello there, and welcome back to another episode of the Schools of Excellence podcast. So this is part 5 in our 5-part series, the paradoxes of school leadership. So we started this series a couple weeks back where I introduced the concept of the paradoxes in school leadership. We, again, if you haven't, been following this series, please pause this episode, go start with the first episode in this series so you can understand, but I want to do a quick recap here as we go into this final episode. In the world of childcare, we are very, very focused a lot of the times on solving problems and really looking at, what is the solution to this problem? What is the problem we have to solve over here? What's the issue over here? What is this problem? What is that problem? And as we continue to evolve and grow in our leadership, we also need to understand that there are certain problems that actually don't have solutions. It is a paradox. It is not well, this is the one way or this is the two options of how to solve this problem. This is how we manage this paradox. And so I explained the top 4 paradoxes of school leadership. And today we're going to dive into the 4th paradox that exists, probably the one that gives the most angst to school leaders around the world, and that is the paradox of support. The paradox of support in school leadership refers to the challenging balance that school leaders need to make by providing guidance, encouragement, resources to their teams, while at the same time they also want to foster autonomy and independence and individual growth. And so there's this push and pull when it comes to support. But I want to create kind of a little bit more of a backdrop to why the paradox of support feels so sometimes anxiety driven or people pleasing driven, really. So when we help someone, we feel good about ourselves. Okay. So when we do an act of kindness, when we do an act of support, when we, give of ourselves, we in turn feel good about ourselves. So it's not just that the other person feels good because you provided support. We actually feel good about ourselves. And we like to feel good that we are good people and that we're making a difference in the world. And so while seeking support is natural, doing so with an awareness of its impact on others is really the mark of true wisdom and compassion. Okay. So knowing how your support impacts the person that you're supporting is the sign of wisdom, discernment, and true compassion. Because what we need to understand is that all support is not created equal. So sometimes supporting someone is actually hurting that person. And when we think of support sometimes in the realm of childcare, we look at it from this utopian perspective of like, well, of course, everyone wants support and support is amazing for everyone and we should give as much support as we possibly can. Not true. There are actually components that we actually need to look at. So when we look at the perspective of ensuring that our pursuit of support actually contributes positively to the lives of the people that we are supporting, is what we're going to be discussing today. So let me help you understand some of the, opposite side, like the, opposite sides of the same coin when it comes to support. So there's dependency versus empowerment. So when we provide excessive support to our teachers, to our leadership teams, we create a culture of dependency where the staff becomes so reliant on your help that they struggle to develop their own independence. They struggle to develop their own problem solving skills, right? Look at the balance of, the concept that many of you are familiar with like helicopter parenting, right? Where it's like their parents are too involved in their kids and providing too much guidance and too much support and too much step-by-step instruction that the kid becomes paralyzed. They actually have no problem solving skills, no conflict resolution skills, no social skills, no self confidence. They've got nothing because their parents over supported them. And so the discernment, again, between promoting self sufficiency while also assisting people is a challenge. It is a paradox because sometimes you're like, well, the person really needed support. Yeah, but sometimes we push the line too far. And now we've created a culture of dependency as opposed to a culture of independency and collaboration, right? Healthy interdependence, where people are independent, but they also know when to rely on each other. Because again, independence gone too far could be a fault because now you're not recognizing that humans actually need each other and we need to interdependently work together collaboratively. So I want you to pause for a second and I want you to think about what is kind of coming up for you in this moment when you hear me talking about the paradox of support. You hear me explaining that support can sometimes be a not good thing, it can actually be an enabler. So I'm going to tell you a story. A couple of months ago, well, it's probably almost a year ago at this point of the recording, I was on a call with a director. So it's our directors in our circle call, and we have monthly coaching calls where all the directors come on and they can ask me questions and they can learn from each other and they can, collaborate together. And so I was coaching this one particular director who keeps having a very similar problem come up where she keeps getting interrupted. So she works inside of her office and she keeps getting interrupted for little things like, we're out of diapers, we're out of wipes, we don't have this, can you help us, grab this, I need you to watch the kids for a second so I could go to the kitchen and get a snack. All the things, you fill in the blanks. And she can't get any quality work done, and she can't meet her KPIs, and she can't, reach any of these mile markers that the owner is like, hey, hello, like you got to reach these markers here. And so she's on the call with me and she's like, I don't know how to get the teachers to stop, keep interrupting me or keep bothering me. And I said, well, I have a different question for you. When they come, right? I want you to actually look at your behavior from a new lens. Every time you go out of your office and give them the thing that they're asking for, you're actually enabling that behavior. You are enabling them to continue to be dependent on you and not understand how to be resourceful and learn how to figure it out on their own or rely on each other versus you. Now, when I told that to her, she actually like flew back in her seat in her in her office chair, and she's like, "I'm not an enabler." And I was like, I understand that you don't want to be an enabler. Hearing the word enabler is a very strong word, and no one wants to be perceived as someone that enables bad behavior. And we all, and many times, subconsciously enable bad behavior, right? Like every once in a while, I have to catch myself like at home where like I find myself repeating myself and I'm like, there I go again, right? I'm enabling my kids to know, oh, mom will just repeat herself again, right? I find myself going down that pattern every once in a while. I have to recheck myself and be like, no, I said it once, that's enough. Um, some people don't struggle with that, right? Some people are just in general, they say it once and that's it, right? I That's a weak spot for me, right? I have to remind myself not to enable my kids to be set up in an environment where they know that the grown-up's just going to repeat themselves. So they don't even hear me the first time, they tune me out, right? So now let's go to your childcare facility for a second and look at what behaviors are you enabling through the mask. I'm using air quotes for those of you that are not watching the video, through the mask of support. So you are enabling poor behaviors and bad habits, but you think you are a glorious savior because I'm supporting them, I'm showing up for them, I'm giving them everything that they need. When did giving someone everything that they need, or you think that they need, when did that become the glorious end all of like being a director or being an owner? Whatever happened to scrappiness or letting people try to figure it out on their own, or intentional opportunities for people to learn from their mistakes, right? You're robbing people of their learning cycles. How did you get to where you are today? A lot of it came from failure and learning from your mistakes and your learning cycles. Every time you jump into support, you create a culture of dependency, which creates a culture where people do not know how to use their brain and think for themselves. And then you come back and you keep saying people aren't using their brains, people aren't thinking for themselves, people aren't, using their critical thinking skills. Well, you've actually designed that unintentionally, but you've designed a culture where people are taught, I don't have to use my brain. All I have to do is rely on the support of the leader. Let's go a step further. Dignity and autonomy. The paradox of support really involves preserving an individual's dignity. So sometimes we can have this well-intentioned, support, and it really inadvertently undermines a person's sense of agency and self-worth and their own dignity, right? This is like, again, I always like to create context like outside of the childcare space. So there's like in the world of charity, there's like all these different levels of giving charity. And so one of the highest levels of giving charity is actually teaching someone the skill or giving them the tool that they need so they can make the money on their own, right? So that they don't need to rely on handouts. And doing that in a way that really preserves the person's dignity and their own agency in their life, right? And so again, there's all different kinds of charity, right? There's giving to charitable organizations who help people. There's giving food. There's paying someone's grocery bill. There's all these different ways to pay it forward and give charity. One of the ways to provide support for people is to actually give them these tools because you're supporting, you're preserving their dignity and their self-respect. Okay. So again, let's go to a different perspective because a lot of people that listen to this podcast have aging parents. I know inside of our community, inside of our memberships, and whenever I go speak at events, a lot of people come over to me and talk to me about how they are, struggling in their personal lives as they're trying to take care of a sick parent or a loved one that isn't well, or their own spouse isn't doing well, or they have a sick child, and so they are providing support, right? For a loved one. But let's look at this in the context specifically of aging parents, because this is a conversation that, if you do any research, it's been talked about to death. And, we're going through this, on a personal level with Mayor's parents, when we're really looking at, as our parents age and they need more support, right? Physical support. They can't move around as much. They maybe need more cleaning help, or they need, someone to do the grocery bill or clean out the car, or, physical walking from place to place. There's all different kinds of support that older people need as we age. And, and this is so important because this is not a but. And parents want to keep their self-respect and their dignity and their own self-pride. And it is such an arduous journey as children try to provide support for their aging parents while ensuring that their parents' dignity and respect and their own agency is preserved at the exact same time. And it can feel paradoxical in nature. So now let's go to the childcare space, okay? Because this happens inside of childcare also. You can have a teacher who is a veteran teacher who has been in your sphere for 15, 20 years, right? Or even 5 years. And they have always been the teacher who really knew how to, effectively manage a really challenging classroom. They always had great resources and great tools and all of this kind of stuff. And now all of a sudden they're finding themselves specifically in this new era of leadership inside of child cares, where child behaviors are at an all-time high. They are completely different than anything anyone's ever seen before. And now you have a veteran teacher who is feeling very insecure about her standing inside of the classroom because she's like, I don't really know how to deal with this. And you're coming from a place of, I want to provide you support. I want to give you resources. I want to give you tools. And she keeps pushing you away. And you're like, I have everything for you. Just take it. Why is she pushing you away? Well, now hopefully you'll get some context. This is the paradox of support, where we can provide support for someone, but are we doing it in a way that preserves the person's dignity, that preserves the person's own agency? that preserves the person's standing and status inside of the school or amongst their peers, right? This is so important to understand how status and social standing and the mentorship, sorry, veteran, and how veteran teachers, how their standing impacts how they reach out for support. So the way that you provide support is so critical depending on who you're talking to. And I'm going to give you some ideas at the end of the episode. Where else do we see the paradox of support? Long term versus short term goals, right? So balancing short term assistance with long term goals can sometimes be challenging because short term support might be necessary. Um, where you have to kind of step in immediately. And we want to make sure that it doesn't hinder the long term well being of this individual and their own ability to take care of themselves, to use their network, to reach out to the other teachers in their, teaching circle. So again, sometimes we come in and we solve an immediate problem, but we create a whole new heap of other problems as a result of going from the only short term lens, which is again why support can feel paradoxical in nature. Because when we're going to provide resources and support, we have to look at it. Am I providing short term support? Does this sabotage the long term support that we're trying to do? So you'll see this in business all the time. And our company, battles this consistently in all departments. Like we have short term needs. Do those sabotage the long-term goals and the long-term vision of the company? Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. You have to look at each thing. Context matters. Context matters. This is one of the reasons why when I go do leadership days or I do coaching and consulting with schools, the perspective that I bring is nuanced depth. You have to have nuanced depth when you're providing support and coaching because there is not a one size fits all response. It really depends. It really depends. Okay, let's look at a couple more. All right. Maintaining high expectations versus recognizing people's personal limitations. This is possibly one of the biggest ones that I spent so much time coaching on when I'm working one on one with individuals or when I actually go into the schools and work with the staff, hands on and, get inside their circles, or when I'm, coaching clients on group calls. Maintaining the high standards, sorry, not expectations, maintaining the high standards inside of the organization while recognizing a person's limitations, right? So great leaders and leaders who are listening to a Schools of Excellence podcast have high standards for their teams, right? And they're really pushing for high levels of excellence inside of their organization. However, we also need to recognize that people have limitations and people have challenges that they face as they're trying to live up to particular standards. And so discerning between what are the practical limitations of this person versus how they impact company standards is the paradox of support. So you can have a super high standard for how you guys communicate with families, or your high standard for how you set up invitations to play for the children, or your standards for how you run events inside of your company, or your standards for how you do email communication or any form of written communication with families. And then you have people that are driving those standards, right? Because I always say people break organizations more than any standard or SOP or process or technology or financials or environment or the government. People break organizations. Okay. So when you have a high standard inside of your organization, which you should, standards are really important. They are different than expectations. Standards, we want high standards, but then we also have people that come in, and not every person has the same skill set, the same mindset, the same upbringing, the same ecosystem that they're coming from. And so the way that they move and operate within those standards is going to look vastly different than the person sitting next to them. And so I did a whole training on this inside of our membership, actually, on how to manage your own capacity while you're managing your team's capacity, right? Because this is what it's all about. You have a certain capacity for managing stress, for managing, pressures that come at you. And then you have people that are next to you and they're like, I can't handle that, right? Well, the standard is that we want people to handle certain pressures or certain stress levels when you're inside of childcare. There are certain stressful, acupuncture points inside of an organization. And sometimes it conflicts with what the person's personal capacity is. And so when we're providing support, again, it can feel paradoxical in nature, where we have this high standard and then we have this person that can't live up to the standard. And you're like, well, I'm providing with them all these resources. How come they can't live up to the standard? Well, again, that goes back to, you planted the seed and now you're screaming at the seed, why aren't you a tomato yet? Well, you just planted the seed like 4 hours ago. It's not going to be a tomato now. It takes time. And then what happens in the paradox of support is we start to look in other directions. So this is very, very dangerous. Okay. We start looking in other directions. So we start pouring support into a particular individual, and you're not seeing the instant results. You're not seeing, the instant gratification that you're looking for. And so you start looking at other things, right? You start looking at other teams. You start talking to other owners who have this person or this unicorn that they hired or this thing or that thing. And you're like, oh, maybe I have the wrong person. The grass is greener where you water it. I will say that again. And if you're driving, pull over and write it down or come back to this minute mark and remember this. The grass is greener where you water it. So if you want this team member and you want to support this team member and up level them to the standards that you're looking for, the grass is greener where you water it. Pour resources and support into this individual. Now, again, some of you are listening to like, well, what if the person really isn't a right fit? Yes, we have to use discernment. Go back and listen to my entire series on firing. I have a whole series, 3 parts, on when to know when it's time to let go of an employee. That's not what today's conversation is about. Today's conversation is about support. And so when you're looking at a high standards inside of organization and managing the limitations and the human capacity of people, we have to look at, where are my people? What support do they need in this moment? And how does it line up with the company's higher standards? Okay. So now that you kind of understand the lay of the land when it comes to the paradox of support, what do we actually do? Right? Like, what are some practical ways of how we actually work within this? So I'm going to give you a couple of things to look at. Number one, when you're managing the paradox of support, is ask yourself your motivations. So when you are about to jump out of your seat and go do something for a teacher, or you're going to, sit down and pull an all-nighter for someone, or you're about to sit down and do a collaborative working session with a group of staff or whatever it is, and you're providing support, always ask yourself, what is your motivation? Why are you going in to provide this support, right? It's so important to be clear on what's driving that, because energetically, you're going to show up differently when you understand your intention. Are you showing up to provide support with this person because you are afraid they are going to leave? And so you are providing support from a place of a lack? Is very different from when you're showing up to provide support because I want to invest in my people. I know that, watering the grass where I want to see it greener is a powerful, powerful shift. And so that is why I'm pouring into my people. So the way that we navigate the paradox of support is knowing our motivation before we jump out and of our seats and go and do whatever it is that we want to do for this particular person. The other way that we navigate the paradox of support is knowing our people, right? So that is where the regular check-ins come in of, how are you doing? And you're checking it up against, right? So you're putting it up against where the person was the last time that you spoke. So there's always a baseline that you're operating from. So you create the baseline when the person gets onboarded, and then you're looking at that baseline of like, how has the person grown? What other support do they need? Do they need a different kind of training? Do they need to go to a conference? Do they need a particular course? Do they just need time to actually practice and implement what it is that you're teaching them, right? What are the things that are actually needed with this particular person? So that's where the regular check-in comes in. And the last thing is, and this is where like really understanding what mentorship is, tailored specific mentorship plans. So, tailored specific mentorship plans are something that I teach really in depth inside of our owners group and our legacy groups, because mentorship is very different from training. Mentorship involves running very specific practice drills. The check ins look different in mentorship. Mentorship is not checkbox training, it's a whole different game. And most people think that they're providing mentorship and coaching when they're actually just providing more glorious training. And there is a very big difference between mentorship and training, mentorship and coaching, mentorship and consulting. It's very, very different. And I teach that extensively inside of our programs because no one else teaches it, because mentorship involves a commitment to the person that you're mentoring on a very different scale than training someone does. So if you're listening to this and you are like, I need mentorship plans for my team, I need to create individualized mentorship programs that really, really tap into what the person needs to practice, what drills they need to run, how they need to respond to situations, how I check in with them to check where their emotional thermometer is, where their mindset has shifted, where their mental acuity is up leveling. All of these things are trackable, measurable, observable, and repeatable. Like, you can do all of these things, but you have to know how to create a mentorship plan. So if you're interested in that, click the link in the show notes. You can fill out an application, see if you will jump on a right fit call, see if it's a good fit for you to join on the program, so you can learn how to actually implement these things inside of your organization. So let's recap here. The paradox of support. Okay. The paradox of support is the challenge that leaders need to work through as they provide guidance, encouragement, and resources to their teams while fostering autonomy, individual growth, and self trust. And so I hope that you enjoyed our entire series on the paradox of support, all the different elements that we've worked through over the past couple of weeks. Thank you so much for joining us in this series, and we'll see you next time. If you are loving the Schools of Excellence podcast and have gotten any value out of it for your school and for yourself, I would love if you can do two things for me. One, subscribe to the show so you never miss an episode. And two, can you please leave us a review? Reviews help other school leaders know that this is the podcast to learn about building a school of excellence. And I'd be so grateful if you can do that for us. Your help and support make this show be able to listen to by thousands of other school leaders around the globe. Thanks so much for listening and giving us your time and attention each week.